Those of you who are tuned in right now, this is part 2 of the live stream we did this Sunday because for whatever reason, YouTube decided to cut off part 1. So this is going to be the first thing you're seeing, but there's a whole nother section. So if you were watching this post live stream and wondering why I'm starting in the middle of everything, that's why. Go watch part 1 first and then jump back over to here when part 1 cuts off.
Yeah.
So let's get back into, we are actually talking about why IBUs don't tell the whole story and why they don't mean hoppy in beers. We've talked about ways to perceive bitterness so far as IBUs give you bitterness, acidity gives you bitterness, and then protein can also give you some bitterness as well. All those can kind of be additive, meaning if you've got multiple of those in your beer, it's going to taste extra bitter. And there's one more that I want to bring up. We're going to leave out roast because roast has bitterness too, but one more that I want to bring up and talk about a little bit, and that's the bitterness from plant matter.
1 second before we do that, thank you, Reverend. That was super kind of you. We enjoyed the super chat, and that's awesome, man. And congratulations.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to say you deserve it because
cheers,
from
yeah,
what
awesome.
I know you do.
Have you sent us beer before? If not, do it.
Yes.
I want to say you have, though.
Send us some of your beer and then send us some of the beer from the brewery you work at now.
Yeah, both of those. Both. Congratulations.
All right.
And shout out, I forget what brewery you work for, but shout it out too so that I can let people know and they can watch when they're they can check it out when they're watching.
Definitely.
All right, so let's talk about plant matter. Plant matter is something that can give you too much bitterness if you use the wrong way, but in smaller quantities actually kind of adds to the overall mouthfeel and the perception of brightness in beer as well.
This is something that I'll bring up cryo hops. There's a reason for cryo hops and a reason against cryo hops, and that's actually plant matter. So in dry hopping, we love to use cryos. And for those of you who can't get cryo hops or don't know what they are, Lupomax is the same thing. It's basically the straight lupulin pellets. It's not hop hash, but the straight lupulin glands are shaken off of the hops. They freeze them, that kind of good stuff. Look it up. It doesn't have very much plant matter to it is the big deal. So in dry hopping, especially at a time when you feel that you can't get your hop or your beer off those hops very quickly and you don't want to pull green grassy flavors, cryo is beautiful. Very little plant matter to it, so you're not going to get those problems. But if you just make a cryo hopped beer, it's missing something. It really is. It doesn't have the same type of bitterness and flavor that you would get from using full hops, whether that be whole leaf or pellet hops.
So to give you a little history on how IPAs kind of evolved, if you were a home brewer back in the 1990s, a lot of your IPAs would probably be made with somewhere between 3 and 5 ounces of hops, which probably shocks a lot of you because I'm sure a lot of you are using 8 or more ounces of hops in your 5-gallon batches. That's one of the reasons that doing all pellet or even all leaf hops can give you an extra grassy bitterness that you don't necessarily expect in your beer. And that's why cryo hops are a really good thing to add because they can boost all the fruitiness from the lupulin, all the hop oils. But if you do 100% cryo hops, even with that amount, you still won't have that same plant matter bite. And so having we usually do some combination of cryo hops and pellet hops in all our beers.
Doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, it tastes bad, or you can't do it. Just realize you are going to be missing some of that green, grassy bitterness that you do get from the plant matter. And along with plant matter, actually, I'm going to include into actual plant matter from other things. If you are adding in bitter orange peels, or if you are adding in basically any citrus peels.
Herbs too.
Herbs as well. Herbs are going to pull some tannins. Various herbs have different bitterness. We all know that gruits get their bitterness not from hops, but from other herbs and spices, roots, various things growing in the earth. Well, you know, go watch the Thomas episode. He explained that. So there's different things in that. If you are adding that extra stuff in, if you're making, you know, say a grapefruit IPA, do realize when you're adding some of that grapefruit zest, peel, grapefruits, that flavor in there, that's going to have some bitterness that's going to add to your beer. Along with the citrus, that's going to add a little bit of extra acid to your beer too. So that's going to up your perceived bitterness so you can actually back off some of the hops or trade some of the early hops, bittering hops, for some more late addition hops, knowing that you're going to get some bitterness coming from these other sources.
Yeah. But what's great about losing some of that plant matter overall volume in your beer is it also does reduce the amount that's absorbed, which means you make more beer, a higher quantity of beer. There's something.
Yeah,
Pen Cove,
exactly.
Pen Cove Brewing Company. By the way, those of you who want to go check out Reverend KY's brewery, especially now that he is the head brewer, Pen Cove Brewing Company. So
Yeah. There you go.
he said Whidbey Island, right?
Well, he said he was going to Hierophant on Whidbey Island,
Yeah.
but I would assume that it's somewhere over there. I'm gonna be honest, like most of that, I know it's all different cities. It's all pretty much the same city to me.
Yeah.
Like
One of the guys earlier was saying something about Seattle or West Coast side is better than East side, and you got to know that all of West side is just like it's Seattle to us.
It's pretty. You have Seattle, then there's like I don't know, Tacoma, Olympia. Grays Harbor is a little bit different, but you know that's also because Gig Harbor, not Grays. Why did I say that? Gig Harbor is a little bit different, but I have family that lives there, and Wet Coast Brewing is there, and I absolutely adore them. They are amazing. Go to Wet Coast if you have not. But you know, I know there's a whole bunch of other different small boroughs. Bellingham is different to me, but that's only because of Chuckanut. Like, I guess I identify different regions of the west side by breweries. So there we go.
Vote for next Whib. Tim and Peter coach their wives to brew versus each other. Tim and Peter can only coach, can't physically help.
Oh, yes. If you, all right. If wives are watching right now, yes, this is going to happen. Be prepared.
Frazzle Pinkwin, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate that.
We do.
Whidbey Island is its own country.
I mean, I might actually agree with that. I don't know that I've been there, but everything I've heard, I might agree with that.
Wasn't it like a army base or something like that back in the day? It was I don't know, something like that.
Maybe.
Let's get back on track.
Okay, wait, sorry. Before we go into anything else, you're done there. Let's pop a homebrew. We going for this guy or this guy?
Lefty.
All right.
And then you rinse and I do the talks about. You talks about and I do the rinse.
Yeah, you're already out. I got this, so let's do it. Rinsey poo.
Okay.
My voice is more soothing. That's not true, but I got it.
My voice is taller.
All right. So we got a note from Eric. He sent us this beer. Let's see. What do we even got here? Oh, nice. I am actually super stoked about this. Badwater Basin Gosa. So coriander, cilantro, a little zest of grapefruit and limes, salt, and so much salt. This sounds awesome. He sent us a thank you note for all of this goodness. We're going to taste this now and drink beer.
Do some drinking. Did you read it? Genus Dudes, I have found you very inspiring and informational as I dived into homebrewing hobby. You are a great source of ideas, and I'm sure you'll be able to give some constructive criticism on the drinks enclosed. Looking forward to seeing you on Sunday mornings. Eric, thank you so much. We appreciate it when people send these, and also when people let us know that they've learned from us and it's helping them out homebrew-wise. That is why we do this. That's why we started the channel in the first place. And so anytime that you're like, hey, thanks, guys, if you appreciate what we said, feel free to shout us out. I don't know, it just makes us feel good. It makes us feel like we're wanted.
It does. Well, it makes... not necessarily validated, but we do this because we enjoy it and we want other people to enjoy it. So
and for popularity. Like that's our main goal. We were both huge nerds in high school and never had any popularity. I would say both of us and Damon, we were all like the losers of our school, like probably the nerdiest.
Oh man, I saw an old picture of Damon the other day and holy God, is he a goober.
There was like
I think
five
you
girls
even called
making fun of him.
yourself out for being a goober on that. It was like a long time ago standing in front of the gum wall in Seattle. Oh man, that was oof. He looks so much better now. Like I'm so glad I didn't know you then.
Comment on the chat if you have anything that you can say to make fun of Damon as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about before we jump into
yeast
the beer
and the beast. Yes, 100% he does, and they are wonderful.
Before we jump too much into, we'll be tasting this and doing our own in our head analysis. But let's finish out topic number one, and then we can talk more about this lovely beer that we have in front of us. So we've talked about how IBUs, acidity, protein matter, and plant matter can all give you bitterness, and there's also that concept of relative bitterness that Tim was talking about earlier. And that concept of relative bitterness is basically any of those above ways to perceive bitterness compared to the beer's sweetness. And so if you've got a big Russian Imperial Stout, which is probably going to be 80 IBUs, it still won't taste terribly bitter, especially if it's aged properly. Because it's Russian Imperial Stout can actually finish, I think, at 1024. it can finish really, really high final gravity.
It can. Barley wine is another thing like this, especially American barley wine. But barley wines are known to finish very, very high. You can have them finish up to 1030. I love the nose on this, by the way. They can finish at 1030, and that's completely appropriate. Nice. And so you really need high, normally for especially American, above 100 IBU levels to counteract that. But with the long aging and everything in there, these beers do not taste that hoppy. When they're fresh, they're generally like a triple or a quad IPA, which if you haven't had a quad, go do it. IPA, not quad IPA, Belgian quad.
Go do it. A good example of an IPA that I think is, will throw a lot of people is Dogfish Head's 120.
Oh, yeah.
If you try Dogfish Head's 120, it's a different category of beer. All the flavor comes across just differently.
Yeah. And that's kind of a perfect example of what an American barley wine will do, pretty much. You have that great big hoppy IPA straight up front while it's fresh, and then while you age it out, super sweet, delicious fine malts on the bottom of it when the hops start to fall off and age out. It is amazing. And even when it's really sweet, when you've aged it out, there's still a really high IBU level. So it again, it's just one of those things you kind of gotta look out for. You have to look at all the beer's components to know where the actual relative bitterness is in a beer beyond where the actual bitterness is.
So to sum it up, whenever you want the hoppiest and best beer, just go to any bartender and any brewery and ask them how many IBUs their IPA has. They'll love that. They'll thank you for it, and then you might actually get a free beer out of it.
Yeah. 100%. And then teach all of your friends that don't know that much about beer, they should ask how bitter a beer is, not what, or how hoppy a beer is, and not what the IBU level of a beer is. Actually, talking about the West Side, Matchless does a really great job over there. Matchless is Olympia. I may not be 100% on that.
They're one of the north of Seattle places, I think.
South.
Well,
they're over by the Seattle area. Anyway, if you can get a hold of Matchless, they do some really, really good. And somebody's going to yell at us.
They're in Seattle, aka all of the West Side.
South. There it is, Reverend. Thank you. Sorry, we got distracted on that. Matchless does an awesome job about this. They do not put IBUs on anything, but what they do put on there is bitterness levels. And they'll say bitterness, medium, bitterness, low, bitterness, high. And this is a really awesome thing that I think they're doing because it's helping change the consumer mindset about this to actually ask what they want and not something that they don't understand.
Yeah. To kind of finish out this topic, we already talked about this, but I just want to, cure my OCD by making sure I say this. Why IBUs don't make a hoppier beer? Because you can have really, really hoppy beers with 0 IBUs, and those are going to be your hazies. Lots of late additions, lots of dry hops. They don't add a lot of IBUs, but they add a ton of those hop oils that you love and want, and so that makes a hoppier beer. Also, IBUs are stupid. Never use them. Even in light beers, they have more of a place, but they're still kind of stupid. And so tell your friends that. Make somebody out there make a meme and then share it with us, and then we'll spread that meme that says something about IBUs being stupid. We will support your decision-making, and we love being provocateurs. So help us provocaturate.
It's a good guideline if you know everything else.
Yeah, which we do know everything else, and so we can use it. But you guys probably only know about 99% of what Tim knows and probably like 30% of what I know. So
fair.
All right, let's get into let's get into tasting this beer.
There's also a couple of good questions in there. I'm going to say that Brewmill Tony, I don't think we actually saw your question, so maybe respond to it fully because the green apple flavor and aroma could be something good to talk about.
Green apple flavor / aroma is acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde is a precursor, gets reduced into ethyl alcohol, which is the alcohol in beer. But it's basically one of those things that yeast is always going to make because it can't make alcohol without making acetaldehyde. And if you crash your beer too early, sometimes you can get it. Also, if there's a secondary fermentation that's kicked up in package in the bottles, a small level of that acetaldehyde can still come through. This is common in certain bottle conditioned beers or aged beers, and sometimes can be pleasant in small doses, but can be a little bit off-putting if it's over-exaggerated.
Example of this. This is a reason that I'm more of a fan of Bavarian Pilsner than Czech Pilsner. Besides some other differences, Bavarian Pilsner generally tends to have a tiny touch of green apple skin in there, and I absolutely love that in that style. But it needs to be one of those things where it's just like a green apple passed by it. Also in some traditional English beers. This flavor can kind of go along with the banana flavor that's in there. But in some traditional English ESBs and milds, things like that, a tiny touch of this can be okay as well. Just, when it starts to actually taste like cider, then sour it, and it will be delicious.
Jake hates us.
Jake hates us.
Might as well have told everyone to ask which beer is closest to Blue Moon.
What do you mean?
That's what Jake said. I think he's talking about the IBU thing.
Oh, yeah, okay. Whatever. Bring us beer, Jake. Yeah, okay. So this beer, this is really, really good Gosa. The salt level, is above what a traditional Gosa would be, most definitely, but I am not disliking it at all. There's great flavors in there. Especially the lime didn't get that really sweet, fruity pebbles. It stayed on lime. That was awesome. Nice and dry in there. It finished out really well, so I do like that too. There's great flavors. The cilantro I'm not actually getting coming through. I think it is an important flavor in here, and it's making a great flavor in here. I don't know that I can necessarily pick it out, but this is pretty awesome, man.
Yeah, no, it's really good. It reminds me a lot of the Tres Agaves.
Oh yeah,
it's got a little bit of that same kind of residual sweetness, and that the lime sweetness. I don't know what kind of limes you used, but it's a sweeter version of lime versus bright and acidic lime, which I love. The head is really, really soft, small bubbles, which indicates that it's got a relative thickness from the not just the malt bill, but from actually the salt that's added. That salt gives you that perceived sweetness on the palate. Before things turn salty, they actually just make you taste more of the malt sweetness that's already in there. So I think the salt levels are still really good and giving me that extra sweetness that I need and that thickness that makes it kind of taste like, to me, like that almost margarita-y.
Yeah, there's a definitely, and I think it's coming from the salt. There's a definite or it might be minerality. I don't know. It is almost chalkiness in the way it dries your mouth out, but it's super, super pleasant. I love it.
And Reverend K, the Tres Agaves we were talking about is from Founders,
Yeah, which is awesome. Definitely drink that. Mas Agave?
Mas Agave. That's right. Yeah, Mas Agave. Tres Agave is a tequila. That's
yes, right. And also drink that. But the Mas Agave. The Mas Agave was awesome.
We need to start a distilling channel. That way people can send us alcohol as well.
Yes. Done. Yeast and the Bee, Zero IBU IPA exist. We've actually done it. And we made it the most bitter thing out there just to make fun of people who ask for bitter beers or high IBU beers.
Flu Shot, I want to say, as a fellow microbrewery minion, I continue to learn loads from listening to the podcast. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Let's jump into topic number two so that we don't get too distracted before it's too late.
Yeah.
Topic number 2 is ways to hop beer. And of course, we've already talked about the 3 different types of hops. You've got leaf hops, you've got pellet hops, and you've got cryo hops. And so those are the 3 things we're probably going to be mentioning as we go through each way. So let's first run through the basics. That way we're not skipping over anybody. You've got your early hop additions that you've seen in a lot of different recipes. Your 60 minutes, your 90 minutes, all throw in first wort hopping and mash hopping into this, although I seriously doubt the efficacy of mash hopping.
Hang on one second. We just got down. Brewmill Tony gave us James Crabtree's question, and that can the apple characteristic be a possible indication of infection as well? And the truth of that is yes. Britannomyces can create some very cider-like qualities to it, especially if it processes some specific sugars or acids down, usually being derived from Pediococcus. But it can do that. Pediococcus makes a lot of malic acid, which is the acid that's in green apple skins. And Brett will convert that into it. So if you've had a fermentation where the carousing hasn't dropped in 2+ weeks, either you have incredible head retention, which is entirely possible, or you could have an infection in there.
Yeah, that's one of those probably hard to say without more knowledge. But we've talked about early hop additions. Early hop additions are generally going to be done, at least for me, with either pellet or cryo hops. I don't need a lot of leafy things floating around the boil, and in a lot of brew houses it can actually kind of cause a mess. But pellet or cryo hops, I usually lean towards pellet hops, but if I have a chance to add pellet hops a little bit later, sometimes I'll do the cryo hops at the beginning just to reduce absorption and get exactly what I need into the beer kind of early on.
One thing I'm going to mention in the early hops, this is something that I don't think is talked about quite enough. When you add in hops, like just as you start your boil, you're boiling them for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, the type of hops matters a whole lot less than people think it does. You are mainly converting the AAs into isoalpha acids. You are mainly getting bitterness out of this, and while there are some different qualities of bitterness, this isn't going to make a huge impact on your flavor. So if you want to use less hop material in it, instead of going, oh, I'm going to throw like 5 ounces of Saaz in at the beginning, throw some cluster in there, or throw something like Magnum that has that really high alpha acid. Get your IBUs from that. You have the same taste basically once it's converted all into the bittering units, and then use your actual flavors for the backside. Sorry, go. Late.
Going into late hop additions, that's where you get a lot of your flavor. Depending on how late, you can get some aroma too, but based on where you're adding them during the boil, a lot of late hop additions, if you can't chill your wort down very fast, really aren't going to be adding aroma to it. That's a misconception that I think a lot of people don't really understand. If you've got a really killer immersion chiller and you can chill your entire beer in 8 minutes, yes, a 15-minute addition can add some aroma. But for the most part, the vast majority of you out there, your late hop addition is giving you mostly flavor, even if it's 5 minutes or later, mostly flavor and not a lot of aroma. This is also a good time to start adding, if you don't already have that pellet for that plant matter bite, a little bit of that.
Yeah. And that's Peter brings up a good point about this, is consider your chilling times while you're doing this. Even on the big level, we have to consider our chilling times. The brew house that we use downtown, our 7-barrel brew system, doesn't have a very efficient way to chill down for Whirlpool. So anytime we want to do a Whirlpool hop addition, we have to wait almost 20 minutes for the boil kettle to cool down enough to add these. That means any hops that we add in before that, we have to shift 20 minutes forward. Other words, they're going to have all of that extra time of bittering and losing their flavor and aroma. So if it takes you an hour to cool down, realize that and shift your hopping schedule to compensate for it. Whirlpool, since we're talking about it.
Whirlpool is a great way to get all the flavor and aroma, especially if you can close your entire system during Whirlpool. So you've done all your boil offs that you need. If you're worried about DMS, depending on your malt, then the potential for precursors, which they don't normally have. But if you're worried about DMS, you've done your full boil, you've already boiled off all the SMM, or converted all the SMM to DMS and boil it off. But you're in the Whirlpool. If you can close that system, get a lid on there, and then chill it while spinning it around, that's a great time to add a buttload of hops for that extra. Like, let's get you some juice that you're squeezing out of your beer. Get that kind of flavor and feel into the beer.
This is how you make juicy IPAs. Also hazy in that. Hazies do tend to be a little bit more bitter than most juicies. But this is, if you want to make a juicy IPA, do not add a single hop in while the flame is on. Just chuck it all in the Whirlpool. You'll just get all of those really good, fruity, juicy flavors coming off of it. And the reason why is you're not converting into IBU at this point. You're not converting alpha acids into isoalpha acids. If you hit it at about the 190 degree Fahrenheit, for those of us in the US, at this, you're no longer converting alpha acids into isoalpha acids. All you're doing is melting all of the good fats and oils and lipids from the hops into the beer and preserving the full flavor and aroma of them. So Whirlpool, if you want to experience the flavor of your hops more, Whirlpool is a great place to do that.
Did Ben Askren win? I have no idea. I don't watch MMA. I'll add on to the Whirlpool. Oh, so one note on doing a really big Whirlpool edition is that, also thank you so much for the super chat. Homebrew Fly. I was like super short on that. No, I don't know. No idea. Don't watch MMA.
No idea.
But I appreciate the super chat. If you do a really big Whirlpool hop edition, that really big Whirlpool hop edition can be all you need. We've had plenty of really, really great juicy IPAs that we don't even dry hop. And I know there's some people that are like, dry hopping is for saints. Everybody needs to do it or else it's not an IPA. If you do a really good Whirlpool edition properly, especially if you're planning on pressure fermenting that sun gun, then you can make a really, really flavorful and aromatic IPA very quickly. That's what I was trying to say. My brain lost its groove
Jimmy
back.
got onto that. Let me jump onto that. We actually do not add any hops into our juicy IPAs while there is flame on it. Zero. We do not add any dry hops to our juicy IPAs at all. Zero. Everything goes in there. Now, I do set it up when we're doing this, so I add in half of the hops at flame out, let it naturally fall down to 190, and then add the other half of the hops for that good Whirlpool addition. So we are still getting a small amount of IBU, a small amount of bitterness coming out of it, but not that much. No hops hit flame in any of our juicy IPAs because I find we just get better flavor coming out of it that way. What Jimmy said on here, using a mid-boil over start of the boil bittering addition, so you're getting the flavor too. That's exactly where we add all of our bittering additions on our West Coast IPAs, where people have been loving our West Coast styles for having that good bitterness, but it's not bitter. We don't add hops in before 30 minutes on that. We let it boil the full 60 minutes down, but we're adding our bittering addition at that 30, counting on the extra 10-15 minutes for it to cool down to 190 for the Whirlpool edition. That's giving us about a 45-minute addition on there. We're preserving a lot more of the flavor coming off of it, still getting some good bitterness coming out of it.
And to add one more kind of addition to that Whirlpool edition that you can do, I'm going to lump this in because it's something that we do really regularly, is that hop back to get that extra layer of juiciness and also filtration of the plant matter, because this is an area after which plant matter can actually start to add too much bitterness if you don't get it filtered out before fermentation.
Yeah. It's kind of something that we started doing more as a filtration method, is just using a hop back with whole leaf hops in it. It was one of those, well, we don't want all of our hop material in our beer. Filtering it out would be tedious. So let's get a hop back and run it over whole leaf hops. And then the whole leaf hops filter out all the extra proteins and hop material.
Plus to give us that extra juice squeeze from all the hops that are in there.
Yeah. Awesome way to do it. So that's how we achieve a lot of full packed hoppiness into our beers. And I will say our IPAs tend to use less hops than what I have seen from other IPAs on the market, and especially locally. But we tend to get more flavor out of it because we're using the hops in better ways.
Lots of people commenting on it. Was the fight last night? Is that what happened?
There was a couple of fights last night. I don't know. I saw
something about Jake Paul, and then somebody just commented on Jake Paul. I don't know if that was. I didn't think Jake Paul I didn't think that was still a thing. Like, I thought that was the one big Logan Paul versus KSI and Jake Paul versus Deji, and then after that they stopped.
I don't know.
Maybe I'm behind the times.
But it's a sign.
All right, we'll turn on MMA. I think Josh turns on MMA when he's here. We'll get caught up. We'll have Josh catch us all up. Let's talk about dry hopping, and there's a couple different ways to dry hop real quick. We've talked about it plenty on the channel, so we're going to kind of speed run through dry hopping and then talk about different things you can add to add hoppiness to your beer that you might not know about. But let's go into dry hopping first. So we know there's biotransformation and there's cold side or post-fermentation dry hopping.
Yeah. So Biotransformation. Let's talk about this one. This is one that it gets tossed around a bunch. I don't think it's quite as fully understood as what some people think it is, or they may not quite just understand what it is. So a lot of hop flavors on there, a lot of hop aromas can actually be broken down by yeast. There's some sugars in there. Well, the esters can... I got so far lost on that. I apologize.
They're glycosides, is what they are. So
yes.
But through hydrolysis, the yeast can actually break the glycosidic linkages, which breaks off an aromatic oil from a sugar. So that's why you get a little extra fermentation or a little extra potential for diacetyl when you dry hop.
Yeah, that also goes into hop creep a little bit in there. So that's one of the reasons that hop creep can happen. The other reason that hop creep can happen is that there's actual enzymes in hops, and they can further break down sugars, and the yeast can further ferment it. So if you're doing heavy dry hopping, just be aware of hop creep. Don't add it too early. But biotransformation is a really good thing in some styles. It's not for every single style of IPA out there, but especially for doing like the New England IPAs and things like that, breaking apart some of those flavors with the yeast is going to give you a new complex hop flavor coming out of it. And that's something that you should look for. That's why most of the time there's 2 different hopping schedules in New England's and hazies. Dry hopping schedules. You're trying to hit at high Krausen so you can get that biotransformation and get more complex hop flavors coming out of there. So then there's later edition dry hoppings on there where you're trying to avoid the biotransformation. You don't want hang on, Lars, we'll come back to that. You don't want that extra fermentation of the hop aromas and flavors, and West Coast is actually something on there.
So a lot of people are proponents. They're people who enjoy dry hopping cold, and this has its disadvantages because if you do not filter out or you cannot fully crash out your yeast, even if you're cold, there can still be some slow yeast activity. So dry hopping cold can be a risk. But if you can do it correctly and you can get most of your yeast filtered out, dry hopping cold actually sharpens and brightens the flavors that are pulled out of the hops. It also reduces the potential for any sort of vegetal matter to kind of get through and give you that extra bitterness that you might not want. And a lot of people have just said that it opens up the aromatics a lot more.
Yeah. Actually, that's kind of flows into it. Hubert X on there. Taking out the biotransformation if you leave your beer sometime after primary fermentation, yes. So this is a risk to that. If you open up your vessel, you're exposing it to oxygen as well as risks of infection. But if you are leaving those biotransformation, if you're leaving the beer on the biotransformation hops longer than 5 days, you should probably get them off of those hops because that's going to start to extract all of that bitter plant material and the stuff you don't want. So unless you're using something like cryo hops, which has less plant material to it, so you have less of a risk of pulling those bitter, harsh flavors.
That's why cryo hops are baller for dry hopping. That's what we advise. Thanks for the advice and feedback in the chat. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much, James Scrapshy, and thank you, Homebrew for Life, for the other super chat. I am not cousins with Stan Marsh. I don't think I am related to any South Park character.
At least that he knows of.
That I know of. I did have some wild days back in my youths. So we never know.
You never know.
Let's talk about different things that we can add to beers on the back end before we have to get opened up here. Things we can add to beer on the back end to really boost that hop presence, the perceived hoppiness that you get in your final beer. And I want to start out with something that really kind of came onto the market a while ago that's really misunderstood. And it came out as a derivative of actually what is used for big beverage companies, AB InBev, the Budweisers and Miller Coorses, to kind of give you all your hoppiness without losing any volume, basically, and also without having extra stuff to clean in their system. And that is hop oils.
Yeah, don't jump the gun on us, Jimmy. The hop oils. So hop oils is something that was developed by the big guys so they don't actually lose as much beer to hop materials and things like that, as well as making more consistent batches for them. Because of that reason, a lot of home brewers and craft brewers have poo-pooed them for a long time because it's a cheater way to do it. But this is actually a really, really good way to add some extra punch as well as very specific hop flavors to your beer without having to mess around with doing dry hopping or full hopping or anything like that. It's far more controllable than any of the natural methods.
Hop oils have some downsides, though. They are very difficult to use and often are underutilized by homebrewers specifically. They need to be, first of all, preheated. They need either a long boil time or an already high alcohol amount in the beer to get full usage at them, or else they're just going to sink to the bottom and not work. And most hop oils that are out there are used better as bittering additions than anything else. Which brings us to our next one, which is hop concentrates, which Jimmy also mentioned as distillates. Distillates is one form of hop concentrate. There's a company in Montana called Hop Zoil, which makes a different kind of hop concentrate that's not from distillation. But those are a really good way to add, to have an aromatic component that you can add directly to your keg.
Yeah. Another good way that we have been experimenting with, and I think needs far more industry experimentation on it, is isolated terpenes. This experiment was amazing that we did, and we made just kind of a nice basic American IPA for the base of this, but adding single isolate terpenes to each kegs to change what they did was incredible. Getting to experience those terpenes individually by themselves was awesome, and it'll make you a better brewer because now you can actually taste what they taste like and actually identify it. All right, myrcene actually is these specific flavor compounds in there. But if this is a way to actually, I think, almost designer make IPAs for very specific flavor profiles in there. And I don't know, I'm excited about them. Obviously, I'm excited. They're awesome, awesome things to use.
CH, great question, and that kind of leads into what Tim was just talking about, adding terps or the hop oils or the hop oil hop concentrates directly to the keg is one way to get great hazy flavor without adding that hop burn. The common way just in brewing in general, what I like to do is, first of all, giant Whirlpool edition, obviously, and they've got to be good fresh hops. If they're slightly old or slightly oxidized, you can kind of get that hop burn just by the fact that you get a sharp bitterness off of the hop pellets from being old. But giant hop edition, and then run that through some sort of a filtration mechanism, and then when you dry hop with cryos, ferment the rest of the way under pressure and transfer off relatively soon. Even if that means transferring off before the beer is done, if you're going into a keg, you can just finish off the fermentation in the keg, again under pressure, and then you've saved some CO2 because it's spunded, and that should reduce that hop bite and hopefully give you the right amount of hop burn, but still give you all the juicy flavors.
All right, Lars, I didn't forget about you. Hop creep. This is something we've known about for a long time. We didn't pay attention to it for a long time because it wasn't a big deal. It's much more apparent now. Hops have enzymes is the basic thing. The enzymes in hops can further convert starches in your beer into sugars. Now, what that means is you now have more simple sugars for your yeast to eat. But in heavily dry hopped beers, where this is happening and where it's a problem is when it gets into packaging or in kegs, bottles, cans, whatever. This can overcarbonate your beer a little bit, but more importantly, especially because most of the times these are cold, it produces DMS in your beer, and that DMS has nowhere to go. The yeast, because it's cold. Diacetyl?
Yeah, diacetyl.
I'm sorry. I reversed those two far more than I should. I can't taste either very well, so anyway.
Tim's got word dyslexia.
Every once in a while. Not true, but sort of. So it produces the diacetyl. The diacetyl has nowhere to go. The yeast is not warm enough to be able to reabsorb that or take it off. So a lot of your beers end up coming out tasting corny or cream corny, popcorny, and not good. So this is a real thing. It's just something you have to be aware of, is that if you are very heavily, dry hopping on that, you need to give it enough time, or make sure that the dry hops are going in at a time where the yeast activity is done and you don't get re-fermentation in cold packaging. That's hop creep.
That's hop creep.
In a nutshell.
Ricardo, thanks so much for the super chat. Says, keep doing what you do. I appreciate that. Homebrew for Life, do PRVs actually go off? I feel like they just slowly seep out. I'm working on making a bomb. I've never seen a PRV fully release. It usually does just kind of slowly seep out, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Jimmy J, do you think a heavy Whirlpool leaves enough hop oils in beer for biotransformation? Yes, but a lot of what happens is a different type of biotransformation. It's the reduction of certain oils, namely linalool and terpeneol. It reduces those into some softer, fruitier compounds. And then there still are some glycosides that get broken down as well, but not as much. And I think that catches us up on questions
for most of those. Yeah. All right. So
start working on some closey outies, and I will subscribe, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Damon's YouTube channel, SexyMilf69 at youtube.com.
Oh, Baldsman Brewing. Why should you boil for 90 minutes if not a large Pilsner malt bill? You shouldn't. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of reason to. Yeah, you're going to get a little bit of reductions in there. They're going to help with some of the precursors to DMS and all that kind of good stuff. But with a more heavily modified malt on there, there's not a lot of reason to, unless you're aiming for other specific things like volume reduction or Maillard reaction. Those are two reasons to boil for 90 minutes as well, which are great reasons to do it. So, homebrew, maybe we probably could. Yeah. Nintendo Switch games GoFundMe. And yeah, that could happen. Anyway, let's close out. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for jumping back on after we had our internet issues for some reason. Squirrel got onto the box or something like that. Like and subscribe to our channel. Like and subscribe to our other Genus Not Brewing channel. We all got our individual Instagrams. Like and subscribe to those, as well as the Genus, Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of good fun stuff. Help us help you and keep doing all of this goodness.